Hi, this is Rob Chadwick with ADL, and I'm just doing kind of a quick demo for a couple of specific people of what has become sort of a hobby for me over the last 2 weeks, a terrain renderer within this WebGL virtual world framework kind of system. So you should see on the screen right here a bit of a terrain, and to show you like the kind of scope we're talking about, let me just walk a little bit. When you start to see the parallax here, you'll see, oh my goodness, that is like a really significant amount of space. If I turn around, you'll actually see I've got kind of a line of bots up here that are all slave to my keyboard. You'll note that they all kind of collide correctly with this terrain as they walk off down this mountainside. Yeah, and there they go. At the moment, this is all generated procedurally. The system doesn't really care where the data comes from, though I haven't even dealt with like paging in tiles of height map or something. There's all my guys down there along the edge of the... They're slave to my keyboard. I can't quite catch up with them. But anyway, so you can see I'm covering like a pretty significant amount of space here. Here I am standing up on top of this. I have this thing tuned currently for like, I don't know, it's like 40,000 square kilometers or something. There are little updates that you can see, but the updates are pretty much invisible at human speeds. When you start moving a couple hundred miles an hour, you can begin to kind of overrun the queue of updating tiles. Let me see if I can show you some of that. I'm going to switch into kind of a different mode here. And you actually saw it there kind of update a little bit. Let me find my character. I'm just going to kind of double click myself in the editor here and zoom. So there's me. And now I'm in kind of a different camera mode. I can spin around. And if I zoom out, you can see really, let me get that icon off the screen, you can see really like these significant scales we're talking about. That little line of people right there is my characters. And as I can continue to back out, you actually see the system. You see it right there and right there. It's kind of like paging in lower resolution tiles of this terrain. Now when I'm in this camera mode, I'm able to move at really ridiculous speeds as far as like real world speeds go. So you can see I can kind of outrun this thing. And then there'll be a little bit of a hiccup and it'll start like re-resing the terrain that's beneath me. Here you can see it kind of pop in the higher and higher resolution. Something that I haven't really figured out how to deal with yet is, were I to hit the W key on my keyboard right now, my character would be walking, but he would be colliding with the lower resolution copy that is now over there, back where he was. So this is procedurally generated, and it's just kind of like these mountains and valleys, and it goes on pretty much forever. It goes on for longer than anybody cares to go find the edge. It is kind of a weird thing to be in this virtual environment and then actually have to walk for 20 minutes to get somewhere. I don't know that anybody like realistically would ever want to do that, but like procedurally generating these huge terrains is kind of interesting. So one of the challenges here is that I don't want to do a GPU displace. Like this is all like a real easy problem if you do a GPU displace. But I want to keep it on the CPU side because I'm loading stuff into the collision system as necessary to keep people like standing on the ground and objects driving on the ground. So that's a little bit tricky. Something else that's a challenge is as I page in these terrain tiles, all right, let me see if I can get a really obvious one. You can see it doesn't happen all at once, it happens over time because I'm queuing up the sort of updates to the graph and doing a couple of them every 1/10 of a second or so. Since I can't really get real multi-threading in JavaScript, it's not that easy to like push these things back into the GPU. I could, I could do the displacement on the web worker, but I'd still have to transfer it back to the main thread for post up to the WebGL context, and that's really where this little bump comes from. So I'd like to make that faster. I'm not really sure what the answer is. I did just finish getting the terrain tiles to all stitch together correctly. You can see once all the tiles are loaded, there's a little crack right here. Let's see if we can do it again. It's hard to get a crack. There's a crack right there. It disappears because though the meshes are all different resolutions, they've got this nifty trick that I read about to kind of stitch the edges, which is also nice because there's no active stitching required. All I have to do is, let me put it into wireframe here. I'm sorry, I'm typing over my other console. Dot one sec, sorry. There we go, put it into wireframe. So here you can see it in wireframe mode, and you can see these borders right, the resolution of the mesh steps down ever so slightly. Here's the really highest resolution piece. It's kind of hard to get it, but here in the corner, you can see how these form like a beautiful seam. And if I go back to not wireframe, you'll see that you can barely see the seam there between tile edges. All right, let me go back again. You can see some scenes out here because the normals are interpolated per vertex, right? And this little edge of stitching, while it does technically not have a seam, it still has a very abrupt transition. It's not like a single pixel transition, but off in the distance in some places, the polygons are so fine that it works out to almost a single pixel, and it looks kind of abrupt. One thing that is nice is this thing has kind of a constant memory footprint, because you know, I can reuse these same tiles and just rotate them to get the correct pieces on the edge of the high res to low res space. I'm using a big quad tree to organize the high resolution areas versus the low resolution areas. And something I'm kind of looking into is, given the fact that I don't expect people's camera viewpoints to move more than a couple hundred miles an hour at the outside, right? And realistically, if you've got viewpoints moving a couple hundred miles, like, you're going to have to tune some variables differently. For people who are walking or driving, I might switch at the lowest level, like the central level of this. It's a balanced quad tree. Switch these internal tiles into like a geo map or something, so that the transitions aren't as obvious. And that's something that like is optimization on top of this to make it look prettier. But it's basically working now. One final thing that I do want to do is, when the wireframe false, when the new tile kind of pops in, right? There's a little bit of complexity to figure out which tiles can pop in when, and when to remove old tiles and things, so that you never see this big gap. But some of the complexity there is that because the normal shading is different. Like, here's a really good example. The interpolation is kind of different along this edge, 1 pixel over. It would be nice if the higher resolution tiles, when they appear, could appear with every other vertice sort of moved to its linear interpolation of its neighbors, and then animate up to its proper volume. So, like, rather than seeing it pop in, you would see it sort of blend in. So, and once I get that working, which shouldn't be too difficult, some of this, like, updating will be almost invisible to the user. You know, ideally, if there's like things going on in the world and you're not looking for it, you probably won't see it. I do need to find a way to make the compute of the tile positions faster, because if you're moving the camera all over the place really quickly like this, you actually can feel like a little hiccup, because there's sort of like a minimum number of tiles I can page in without leaving gaps. So sometimes I have to page in a pretty large number of tiles if you're moving quickly, and that creates a little jump. But again, let me go back to first person here, which I'm miles away now. You'll notice that was very interesting, right? I jumped miles away, and a lot of this terrain had to be rebuilt because the camera instantaneously moved. But when you're moving at human speeds, a lot of this stuff is completely invisible. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been working on. Obviously, I haven't done any texturing yet, but I think it's going to be pretty cool when it's done. I don't know that the kinds of scales I'm working with are really anything anybody cares to actually work with, but it does make for kind of a cool demo, and it is pretty neat to walk around this environment and think, oh, I'd like to go over on top of that mountain. Well, that mountain is miles and miles and miles of kind of scaled space away. So anyway, that's it.